they've released 17 studio albums, resulting in over 200 million albums sold worldwide, including Back in Black, selling 50 million copies, making it the highest-selling album in rock history. With sold-out stadiums, arenas, and concert venues over the last 40 years, and their latest album, Power Up, released in late 2020. AC/DC remains one of the greatest rock bands in the world, and we're gonna talk about it. This is For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast, with your hosts Eddie Payne and Tommy Pearson.
And welcome back to another episode of For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Payne, and joining me from across the way is Mr. Tommy Pearson.
Hey, everybody. What's up, Eddie?
What's happening? Real quick, I'd like to give a special shout-out to a work colleague of mine. The intro you heard, that deep, manly voiceover, is Mr. Jerry James. So if you need any voiceover work at all, just send us an email to the acdcpodcast@gmail.com and I'll hook you up. I'm pretty excited about today's episode. What about you, Tommy?
Yeah, man, we're diving right into it. We've only been doing this. This is our third episode. And this one's going to give people an idea of the different perspectives that you bring to the discussion and I bring to the discussion, being an older fan. We're going to talk about our top 4 studio albums and our top 1 live AC/DC album. So we'll be coming from 2 different perspectives, but it'll give people a chance to know us better.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at my list now, and how do you want to do this? Do you want to do all of ours in a row, or did you want to do like your number 4, my number 4? Do you want to go back and forth like that, or how do you want to do it?
We can do it. Let's do it like that. Let's start at our number 4 and alternate and go up to 1. All
right. Let's see. How about you go first this time?
All right. So I'm going to start off by cheating.
And I've also got these pulled up in the program here. So if you want, I can just throw up the album cover and you can throw up your CD or vinyl or whatever you got.
I'll throw them up and then you can throw that up also if you want to.
Okay.
So I'm going to start off cheating. We agreed to do 4 studio albums and 1 live album. And right off the bat, I knew that was going to be impossible for me because I love so much of their stuff. This is probably going to surprise some people, but coming in at number 4 in my studio album list is Back in Black. I know this is many people's favorite AC/DC album. And if it's not their favorite, it's got to be their second favorite. But for me, coming in as a fan a little bit earlier than this album, I had already been listening to the Bon Scott stuff for several years by the time this album came out. Now this album was, it was huge to me when I was a young guy. But AC/DC just kept putting out records and good records at that. But when I go back and want to pull out something for a drive or just to listen to around the house or just to jam with on guitar or whatever, I find myself going back to the Bon Scott era more often. Takes nothing away from this record. I'm going to tell you, if my number 1 on my list is a 10, Back in Black, even at number 4, is a 9.98. I mean, my top 4 studio AC/DC records are so close in quality, and the songwriting is so good, the production is so good, the lyrics are so good, the riffs are so good, the solos are so good. They're all just really, really high up there, and I consider them all masterpieces. But Back in Black would be my number 4, but I have to give a little honorable mention here. At first, I thought we were going to do 5, and my number 5 was going to be Dirty Deeds. So I'm going to claim that Dirty Deeds is tied for number 4. I'm not going to explain too much about Dirty Deeds. Everybody knows what it is. In the United States, it came out after Back in Black's massive success, but everywhere else in the world, it was their 3rd album. And I think we were going to talk about what our favorite song is on each one. So, that would change daily for me. On Back in Black, I would probably say that my favorite song at this moment today my favorite song off of Back in Black is probably Giving the Dog a Bone. And off of Dirty Deeds, I would probably say today my favorite song would be Ain't No Fun Waiting Around to Be a Millionaire.
Cool picks. I think, all right, so for my number 4, I am going to go with probably Let There Be Rock.
Ooh, nice.
This album was produced by Harry Vonda and George Young. It was their 4th studio album, and it was also the last album to feature Mark Evans on bass. It was released on March 21st of 1977, and it sold 2 million copies in the U.S. I believe that's 2 million copies to this date.
Cool. Yeah, I'm sure it didn't sell 2 million back in '77. It probably took them way beyond Back in Black to get that album up over 2 million.
Yeah. My favorite track off of this album, and I had never heard this song until we started the tribute band. I'm going with Hell Ain't a Bad Place to Be.
Oh, coolness. Great song.
Every time we play that song, I'm like, yeah, this is a rocking song, and it's just steady flow, and it feels good to play that song, and it's a great song.
All right. So if we were going, if my last pick, really my 4th pick was Back in Black, not my number 4 choice. My number 2 and 3 is a little muddier. I consider 2 and 3 to be a tie. I didn't put a tie at every place. I'm just going to say my 2 and 3 are pretty much indistinguishable for me as being one any better than the other. And those for me are the one you just named, Let There Be Rock, and Powerage. That's my pretty much tie. 2 and 3 are tie for me. If I had to put 1 at 2 and 1 at 3, I would put Let There Be Rock at 2, and I would put Powerage at 3. Let There Be Rock is the first AC/DC album I ever heard. I remember it like as yesterday. I talked about it in a previous episode, so I'm not going to talk about it again in this one. But my favorite track on Let There Be Rock has got to be Problem Child. To me, that kind of is a distillation of, AC/DC's at prime songwriting. They have big holes. They hit a couple of chords and leave big holes, like Back in Black with the don't, silence, da-da-don, silence, da-da-don. Well, Problem Child is the same way. It's a couple of chords at a time and a big silent gap. And of course, Bon Scott's lyrics are humorous as they often were. But that's like a quintessential AC/DC song for me. And then Powerage, I'm putting that one in there. That's really my number. I would call that my number 3, but it's really tied for number 2 if I had to think about it. Another great album. I didn't get into that one until later. I probably didn't have the Powerage album until after Flick of the Switch came out. For some reason, I didn't recognize the song titles on there. There weren't any big radio hits off of it. Some of the songs from it were on the If You Want Blood album, the live album, but there was nothing on there that made me want to buy it. Even it sounds, kind of cliche, but as a kid, a lot of times back then you would buy albums based on the album cover art and the song titles, and the album cover art and the song titles on this one didn't reach out and grab me like some of the other stuff. But once I got it, the more I listen to it, the better I like it. And I tell anybody who's an AC/DC fan that doesn't have Powerage in their top 3 or 4 albums, I tell them they just haven't listened to it enough, because it's a grower, man. It grows on you, and you end up liking all the songs, with killer songs like Riff Raff and What's Next to the Moon, Gone Shooting. The side 2 is definitely some of the least played stuff of their career, but it's all good stuff. My favorite song on that one would have to be Down Payment Blues, which I don't think they ever did that in concert in the early years, but they did do a version with Brian Johnson on vocals live from the studio, from the MTV studios back in probably the 90s or maybe the early 2000s. And it was a pretty good rendition of it, man. And it's a killer song.
Awesome. So my number 3, it is Powerage.
Hey, look at that.
I think you had mentioned this is the 5th studio album. They released it in 1978. And it was the first album to feature Cliff Williams on bass. And it also sold 1 million copies in the U.S. And favorite track on this is probably, I'm going with Up to My Neck in You as of right now.
Oh, very cool. When we started playing,
that's also a fun song to play. It's a little bit faster. It's upbeat.
I didn't think that one was grabbing you. You know, when we first started playing it in our tribute band, it didn't seem like that was one of your favorites. I'm happy to hear you say that. I'm glad it's grown on you.
That's probably because I didn't know it at the time, and I'm still trying to learn it. But yeah, go ahead
and do your number 2, man, because I did my number 2 and 3 together, so I've only got my number 1 left over here.
All right, this one was tough, but number 2 for me, Highway to Hell. This was the first album that Mutt Lange produced, and it was also the last album that Bon Scott was on. He died the following year on February 19th, 1980. And this album, believe it or not, sold 7 million copies in the U.S. Favorite track on this? We've already went over this song before in our previous podcast. If You Want Blood, You've Got It.
Oh, excellent song, man.
That's probably my top song on this album.
That's one of those songs where you can really hear Malcolm at the beginning. Malcolm does the intro to that one, those choppy chords at the beginning, like he does at the beginning of Shoot to Thrill. Very similar feel, same chords as a matter of fact, A, D, and G, and you can really get a good listen to his rhythm tone on both of those songs. That leads into my number 1, which also was Highway to Hell. So, yeah, this is the first AC/DC album that I actually bought new from the store. So I had already heard Let There Be Rock. I had already heard High Voltage. I had not heard Powerage, as I mentioned before. I had not heard the live album. Dirty Deeds had not yet been released in the United States, so I hadn't heard that. So Highway to Hell was the first one that I bought new from the store, and it just, I think it rearranged my DNA or something, man, because they became, well, they already were my favorite band just from Let There Be Rock. But this is when they really overwhelmed me, and I was like, oh my God, this is the best rock band that's ever walked the planet. And I still think that, and this is still my favorite album of theirs. And Highway to Hell is my favorite song off of it. It's my favorite song of all time. And it's another one that, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it's one of those ones where they play a couple of chords and leave big silent gaps. And the thing that I find so cool about the song Highway to Hell is, I mean, it starts off with just Angus on guitar. And there's, then the drums come in. There's no bass, and there's no, Malcolm doesn't play on the verses. There's no rhythm. There's just Angus playing rhythm guitar on the whole intro, on the whole first verse. And it's not until the chorus that the bass and the rhythm guitar come in. Well, Angus plays rhythm during the verse. And then after they do that chorus, everybody drops back out again. Cliff and Malcolm just drop the hell back out, and it's just Phil and Angus carrying the music and Bon Scott singing over top of it. Cool lyrics, big sing-along chorus, great little solo. It's 3.5 minutes of perfection, in my opinion.
Yeah. All right. So number 1 for me.
Drum roll, please.
How about if I just show you the album cover here?
I've got a good guess.
All right, here we go.
Of course.
Back in
It had
Black.
to be.
Now, this album was also produced by Mutt Lange. His 7th studio album, first album for Brian Johnson. 25 million copies in the U.S. to date. That's including the, I believe, the downloads and the streaming as well. Now, the first song, the first song that I heard on this album is also my favorite song from the album, and that's the reason. You Shook Me All Night Long. No surprise there, right?
Well, you could have picked anything off of that album, and I would have definitely given you props for it. There's, that's a no-dud album. I mean, just like you just said, 25 million sales in this country, and probably worldwide. What is that? Probably 40 million or something.
I think it was over 50.
Is it
Yeah.
over 50 now? So that's, that's I can't remember what they call that. There's platinum, and then there's a level above platinum now, something like star platinum or something. I can't even remember what it's called.
Diamond,
but anyway,
isn't it?
It might be, and that you get for 10 million copies sold, I believe. And of course, there you go. That album has sold a ridiculous amount of copies worldwide.
What was I going to say? This album, it's probably the only AC/DC album that I can listen to all the way through without turning it off.
Oh man.
There's, few of the earlier albums, there's a couple songs that I just can't get into, and some of the later albums with Brian Johnson, we were discussing this earlier before we started the podcast. There's a lot of fillers on some of those albums, but this is the one for me that I can listen to from start to finish without turning it off.
Yeah, I definitely understand that.
And Highway to Hell's a close second. I can get all the way to Night Prowler and then I have to turn it off.
Oh my God, no. Can you make it through Love Hungry Man?
Yeah, more so than that's got a good groove to it until the chorus. Then you lose me on the chorus.
Oh man. All right, well, let's get into that was our top 4, and for me a little cheat 5 studio albums, and let's go into our live album picks.
Yeah, let me pull my screen here. All right, do you want to do yours first, or would you want me
Yeah,
to
I'll do mine. This won't be any surprise to you because you know me, but and it might not be any surprise to anybody that's listening because or watching, because I've pretty much made it known through our previous episodes and through my top 4 studio albums that I'm a Bond man. So of course my top live album is going to have to be If You Want Blood. This album, I mean, still, when I put it on today, it can be in the car, it can be in the house, it can be wherever. It sounds like you are in the room with them. It is recorded so well, and it's so loud and so energetic, and the crowd's into it. And it really, it gives you the best live music feeling of any live album I've ever heard. And of course, I've got dozens of live albums, but none of them bring me into the concert head like that one does. And I just want to mention this magazine right here. You put this up there. This is Classic Rock Magazine, issue number 294. You might still be able to find this at Barnes and Noble or anything, because they usually leave them up on the newsstand for quite a while. And you can see there's Angus and Bond on the cover. And this had a pretty long article in it about If You Want Blood, the album, and the tour that album was recorded on. And they specifically talked to people who were at that concert in Glasgow the night that was recorded. They talked to people that worked at the venue who talked about them coming in the middle of the day and playing Rock and Roll Damnation on stage to rehearse before the show that night. And the person who was working there had never heard that song before because it was brand new. It just come out on the Powerage album, and he hadn't heard it yet. So they rehearsed that song in the middle of the afternoon. But that's an excellent read if your Barnes and Noble still has it on the shelf. Now I want to mention a couple other things though. You would think that because I'm such a Bond fan, that was my only choice as far as live albums to choose from. You've got a couple of them that Brian Johnson appears on, and of course, if you include, DVDs or VHS tapes, if you go back that far, there's a plenty of Brian Johnson stuff live out there, and there's only really you think there's only really If You Want Blood for Bon Scott as far as being a live album, but you can't forget this. This is AC/DC live from Atlantic Studios. I remember seeing this in record stores back in the day. And I didn't buy it back then because I didn't know what the hell it was, and it looks kind of bootleggy. And I knew all the song titles on it were old, and I was like, that's odd. Well, it turns out that this was recorded in December of 1977, so of course it has older songs on it. They didn't even have Powerage out yet. So it's all songs from the first couple of albums. But it's a really, really energetic thing. And it's like record executives and secretaries and people that work for Atlantic Records in a studio in New York with AC/DC just in there playing live like it's a party. You can almost hear the drinking going on. So I could have chosen that one, but I didn't. And that AC/DC Live from Atlantic Studios, it came out in very limited vinyl back in the day, but it was re-released on the Bonfire box set years ago. So that's where you can find that. Actually, I take that back. It might have been on Plug Me In or something. Anyway, it's in one of their box sets. What is in the Bonfire box set is this bad boy, the Let There Be Rock movie soundtrack. So I could have chosen that one. Now, that one comes a little bit later in their career. This is after Highway to Hell had been released, and this is from the movie Let There Be Rock. The CD version is called Let There Be Rock, the movie live in Paris. And it's the show that they did that you see depicted in the movie, but it's just the music part of it. So you get to hear some of the Highway to Hell tracks. It's got Walk All Over You on it. It's got Highway to Hell, Girls Got Rhythm. You get to hear some of those brand new tracks mixed in with some of the older classic Bond stuff. So I could have chosen any of those, but I had to go back to If You Want Blood because of that, because of how energetic and how live and how it makes you feel like you're right there in the room with them.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with you on that. I'm making that my second favorite, just because of the live raw energy. Yeah, it's just like every song from one to the next is just constant. You know, that's back in their heyday, back when they were on fire with Bond back then.
Yeah, like they had something to prove.
Yep. All right, so let's see here. For my live album, I'm actually going with Live at River Plate. This is with Brian Johnson on vocals, and this was their Black Ice World Tour, 2009. They recorded River Plate Stadium in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Something cool about this is the recording of the concerts required a use of 32 HD cameras. Can you imagine that many cameras filming a concert?
That's nuts, man.
It just doesn't seem, I mean, that's a lot of people involved in that, making that concert come to your living room.
No kidding.
It was the band's final live album to feature Malcolm Young before his retirement in 2014. Fun fact, concert DVD director, you know what his name was?
No idea.
David Mallet.
Oh, yeah. He did a lot of this stuff. I didn't know he did that one. That's cool.
That's also your stage name.
That is my stage name, Mallet Young, indeed.
Thought that was pretty cool.
That is cool.
All right, so just to recap on mine, live album was Live at River Plate. Studio albums, number 4, Let There Be Rock. Number 3, Powerage. Number 2, Highway to Hell. And number 1, Back in Black.
And my live album was If You Want Blood. My tied for number 4 was Back in Black and Dirty Deeds. My tied for number 2, 3, pretty much the same. Well, I'll call my number 3 Powerage. I'll call my number 2 Let There Be Rock. And my number 1 studio album is Highway to Hell.
Awesome. This was very fun. I like this.
Yeah, this is cool.
We could talk all day about this stuff, you know.
Yeah, in later episodes we'll get into our top, Bon Scott songs and our top Brian Johnson songs, and then we can get deeper into each of them's catalog.
Absolutely. And speaking of Brian Johnson songs, on the next episode we'll be doing Brian Johnson songs. We're going to pick our top 5 Brian Johnson songs. Or no, I'm sorry. We're going to take all of the albums that Brian Johnson was featured on, and we're going to pick our favorite ones off that album.
Yeah, cool. Just go right through them all?
Yep.
Excellent.
So we'll start from Back in Black and go all the way to Power Up.
That will be cool.
And real quick, I want to just want to ask, do you think that AC/DC is going to tour again?
I do. I think because, well, technically their 50th anniversary will be in 2023. They played their first gig as the band that we all know and love on December 31st of 1973. So I hopefully, the world gets COVID under control. I don't feel like they would want to just fade out with some big shebang. It might only be 5 cities, it might be, Sydney and New York City and LA and Chicago and London. It might be very, very limited, but I do think that they will go ahead and do some sort of final shows.
As far as like the U.S. stuff, it would be sweet if they did just like a strictly exclusive stadium tour, like some of these other older bands from the 80s are doing now, trying to get back out there. They're only playing at stadiums.
Right.
Not doing small venues or anything, big and huge, or just doing stadiums.
Yeah, I think I almost think that's what they would want to do. And it would be ideal if they would at least, their old tours, they might have played 150 shows, right? All over the world, every podunk in every country in the world, they would play it. And tours like Razor's Edge and stuff like that, they, a lot of shows, 150, 200 shows. If they could just eke out maybe, 20 before they decide to call it a day, because really, I mean, you can easily use up 20 shows just in the States alone or just in Europe alone. But if you confined it to just the biggest of the big, and you went to, LA, New York, Vancouver, Chicago, Washington, D.C., you'd really have to confine it to really, really huge places, Toronto. But about 20 or 25 shows could cover the biggest of the big arenas in the world. And that would be kind of a fitting exit for them. It would be a bummer to me if they ended up going out and only doing like 5 shows, like I said earlier, like in New York, Chicago, and LA, and Sydney, and London. That would be a bummer to me, because that's not giving enough fans a final chance to see them. And whatever they do, I hope they document it. I hope they record backstage and do interviews and record the shows. And I hope we get another live DVD or album or both out of it before they retire.
Yeah, I think that if they are capable of doing another tour, they should make it their farewell. Unfortunately, maybe their last tour, I would think.
Yeah,
because I mean, they're all up there in age, and they're doing the best they can. And every time they, I wonder how many days it takes for them to recover from one show. Because they come out there, and Angus is all over the place, and he's little, and he's probably 110 pounds soaking wet, but I can see them doing one more tour, and then, like you said, hitting like all the major cities in the U.S. And it sucks being in this part of Virginia, because you've either got to go to D.C. or Maryland. Virginia Beach, their venue's okay, but it's not as big as something in D.C. would be, right? Because D.C. is a major city,
right? That's where I've seen 2 or 3 tours in DC, and that's as close as they came. They came to DC or Charlotte, North Carolina, Charlotte or Greensboro, maybe. I think the last time I saw them somewhere, and this is not small. There's a place in Virginia called Manassas, where they call the venue Bristow, I think. And I saw the Stiff Upper Lip tour there. And that's a big outdoor shed kind of thing. I don't like seeing them places like that, but if that's where they're going to play, then that's where I'm going to go.
Yep.
But you're right. I mean, it's a high energy show, especially for Angus. Luckily, he's the second youngest in the band. He was the youngest the entire life of the band. He was the youngest until Mal died. And Stevie was brought in. Now Stevie's the youngest, but not by much. Stevie's only like a year or 2 younger than Angus. But anyway, Brian Johnson is, like 72 or 3 or something, which Bon Scott would be if he was still alive. He'd be that old. And Brian Johnson, it is a hard gig for the singer of AC/DC. And, to think that he's in his mid 70s is going to, and is going to be able to do this long term, get up there and do 2 hours worth of music. I just don't think that's feasible anymore. They would, even if and when they do go back out on tour, they're going to probably have to choose the songs pretty carefully. And as you commented a few minutes ago, they might want to give it a couple of days in between gigs instead of just one. They don't want to be doing 4 or 5 nights in a row. Probably a gig, couple of nights off, another gig, couple of nights off. That probably get them through.
Yeah. I just, I wonder, since when they put out Power Up, they did all these teasers ahead of time. Like, they gave you little hints. They started putting up like billboards all over the world and stuff. I wonder if they're going to do that for their tour. Are they going to tease it, or are they just going to come out and say, boom, we're playing our final tour, blah, blah, blah. Tickets go on sale this day. Are they going to do like these little teases like they did for the album?
I bet they would tease it. They've gotten good at that, man. The last 4 or 5 albums, man, they got into, somebody in their organization got them into the, internet marketing kind of vibe. They know what they're doing now, dropping a single pretty far ahead of the album, kicking out a video. All of a sudden, you hear them doing an interview on a morning show in Australia, or, something like that, or doing a TV appearance in London. It's like, wait a minute, these guys lay low between albums, and now all of a sudden they're coming out and talking to people, and yeah, you start to hear a little seismic trembling, and that something's happening. And then the next thing you know, they make the full blown announcement. Yeah, I think we'll hear about it. And, if I have to, I've seen every tour since Blow Up Your Video. So I don't want to miss them. If they do a final tour, if I have to go to, New York City or Chicago or LA or somewhere, I'll go. I'll end up going if I can get a damn ticket. It's the way ticket sales go online these days, it's super, super hard. The tickets go on sale at 10 a.m. and you sit there and you try for 15 or 20 minutes to get through, and you can't even get through because they're overwhelmed. Their servers are overwhelmed. And then, you say, okay, well, I'll come back and do it in 30 or 40 minutes. And you come back on there in 30 or 40 minutes and they're sold out.
Yeah.
So it's a real pain to try to get to a concert these days.
Yeah, they are pretty hush-hush in between, because you haven't heard jack shit from them since the album came out, other than post on social media. I mean, they're always posting like, on this day such and such happened. They did posting pictures of tickets from tours and stuff, which is pretty cool, but they don't give you any like indication as to what's happening in the future with AC/DC.
And even the videos for Power Up, I mean, I'm glad they did them, but they weren't even in the same room together. Those things were put together through video magic, everybody in a different studio in a different part of the world, and they just chopped it all together, and they looked great. I mean, those videos looked great. It looked like they were all in the same room with each other, but they weren't.
Yeah, and they looked old too.
That's true. Hey man, I'm looking at myself on this camera. I look old. What about me? You kidding? You shitting me, man?
Yeah, I feel old sometimes. It takes me a couple hours to get motivated to do anything in the morning. So yeah, I guess that's part of getting old. Yeah, man, I get that. Well, we're going to wrap this episode up, but we are going to be back next week. I think that's when we'll do the next episode next week. We'll do the top Brian Johnson songs out of all the albums, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. We are For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast. Adios. For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast has been produced and hosted by Eddie Payne, along with co-host Tommy Pearson. Show intro voiceover by Jerry James. For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast is on the following platforms: Stitcher, Google Podcast, Spotify, and Amazon Music. For video of today's podcast, please join us on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook, also on Instagram. Just search For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast. Thank you for listening and watching. We hope you'll join us again soon.